everybody. Welcome back to the Money Healing Podcast. So good to be here with you again. My name is Nadine. I'm a financial wellness coach and a somatic practitioner. And today's episode, we are shaking things up. We are gonna do something that hasn't been done before on this podcast. Well, one of the podcast listeners is here with me right now, and they are going to be interviewing me. How exciting is that? I love this. I love involving my community and involving everybody and, receiving your questions, whether they are in written form or in a setting like this. So, hello, welcome, Seraphina. How's it going?
Hi.
Thank you so much for being
Thank you
here.
so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. So my name is Seraphina, but you can also call me Fina. That might be easier for like the long
Fina,
run.
cute.
Well, I'm a German-Swedish soul, a systemic coach, and I have my background in psychology, international politics, and economics. And so my mission is to help people, teams, and organizations to really fulfill their potential. And I do base my work on positive psychology, which has the aim to really improve quality of life in general, which is one of the things that I believe you do too. So I'm very thrilled
Oh,
to be
yeah.
here. Thank you for having me.
Yay! Okay, well, we kind of chatted about this briefly on the DMs, and the theme is really like about debt shame, and all the stuff that goes in between. And yeah, the mic is yours. Go, go for it.
Well, I can't wait to hear all your wisdom about money and healing. And well, I was preparing a little bit and thinking about that. And that's actually one of the things that I'm super proud of, that I don't have any debt, or, well, I consider it that way.
Yay!
But I think I call it in my work like the dark side of purpose. So every bright and beautiful light thing also has like a shadow side. And so, as far as I experienced it, I feel that has really like a dark side to it. And I would like to hear what you think about that and what that is for you, where it starts.
Sure. So, I'd like to begin by saying that I personally don't have a relationship with debt as my fellow American clients and colleagues, let's say, or Australian even. So I grew up in Jordan, and to take on debt in Jordan, it's not a common thing. So for example, here in the US, once or twice a week, you would receive a credit card pre-approval from some random bank in the mail, like once or twice a week. It's crazy. I actually pile them up because the amount of paperwork, like the amount of trees they're killing, and also like how easy it is to get into debt or get credit cards here in this country in the US. It's crazy. So I didn't really grow up with the concept of debt because I was in Jordan until the age of 23 or 24, and then I moved to Australia. And also in Australia, it's not as easy to get, a credit card, for example, right? So back in Jordan, I would, hear the word debt, and it would also like it would always go to, or my mind would just directly go to like a business loan or like a mortgage or something like that. That's like not a credit card, right? And then going to Australia, I didn't even know what a credit card was until later on. I was like, I was starting to get into the personal finance world, and I started reading books that are based in America, and I was learning how we can leverage a credit card to set up a system that I now teach clients. So the system can use a credit card, or it might work without a credit card. So I was like, what is that? I started researching, and to apply for a credit card in Australia, I had to go in for an interview. It was like, yeah, I know. That was I think a long time ago. That's way over 10 years ago. Way over 10 years ago. I would say like 16 years ago. So I don't know what the situation is like now. However, moving here to the US, I've moved here 8 years ago, and of course I started money coaching and helping clients, and what I've seen is that most of the clients that have debt that are maybe stuck in debt cycles or they have issues with debt, they actually took on credit card debt way before they were educated about it. I remember a client of mine. So let's just put it this way, like maybe 80% of my clients who have debt, who have come to me because of debt, they got into debt very, very early in life, as early as they were maybe 17 or 18 in college. And their understanding of it back then was that it was free money. Yay, free money. How many times have I heard, like, shit, I always thought it was free money. And then later on, they get hit by interest rates and they've taken on such a big responsibility without understanding what it is that they've been doing. And that is most of the time what happens, is that they get into this trap, let's just put it that way, without a full understanding of what it is. So, from my perspective, this is my personal, I use credit cards, and I don't think debt is bad, and we're going to get into that later on of like why I don't think it's bad. And I also believe that the world that we are living in at the moment is designed to put us in debt. It is just the way it is. I don't know, call it conspiracy theory, whatever you want to call it. I don't think I'm not going to go that deep. I don't think of it that way. I just feel like everything is way more expensive than it should be or it used to be. And with the rising cost of living and the interest rates and all that, I don't see any rise or increase in salaries. I haven't heard of that yet, right? So, right? So that's the thing. I see you nodding. Like, there it is, just the design. It's a malfunctioning design of the society that we're living in right now. Saying that, I don't think debt is bad. And I also know that the whole taboo with debt and the whole thing, which we really need to talk about today, which is debt shame, is really enforced by these quote unquote financial gurus of like, you're in debt. The last thing you know you need to do is go to a restaurant. The only reason you need to be in a restaurant is if you work in it. We know who I'm talking about. I don't like to shame to rise, but this kind of shame, this kind of trauma really creates more debt shame. And from my perspective, and everything I do is holistic, debt shame is the first layer that we need to peel off if we want to pay off our debt and stay out of debt.
After what you said, I stumbled actually about a quote that says, you said, like getting into the trap. So that is like any other trap, easy enough to get into, but hard enough to get out of. So when I listened to what you just said, I was wondering, like, maybe there's also a need for that, at least in the US, right? It's hard to get like money from the bank uh, to purchase a house or something like that. I mean, I don't live there. My sister lives in Canada, and we were both raised like, don't ever spend anything that you don't have. Don't even, I don't know, buy something on credit or whatever. And when she moved and they wanted to purchase a house, they were like, oh, we want to see your credit card and bills. And she couldn't prove anything. So she had to prove her ability to pay off things by actually getting debt.
Yes.
So is there also a positive side
Yes.
of it? Like, is there use of debt in a positive way?
That is something I went through as well, because I came here 8 years ago and I didn't have a credit score. And to those who are not in the US, a credit score determines everything in the United States, right? So your credit score really, and I have a lesson on that inside of CFA. So a credit score really is basically telling a lender how responsible you are with debt, pretty much, right? And when I moved here, I didn't have a credit score because I just moved here, and credit scores or whatever, they only pretty much exist here, maybe in Canada. Eh, you know, they do exist in Australia, but they're not as weighty as they are here. Let's just put it that way. So, like you said, I had to create debt to have a credit score. So what I did was that I got a secure credit card, which is basically you pay $100 and you get a credit card with a $500 limit, and then you put your Netflix on it or whatever for $10 and you pay that, and that's how you start like creating a
Hmm.
credit score. Yeah, it is real, and it's very confusing for a newcomer, especially when they're like, "Oh, what's your history?" I'm like,
Yeah, it's kind of like
I
with
have
the
to take on
belief like
debt.
you
Like, what the
shouldn't have
hell?
it, but you need it to do things, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's so weird,
It
right?
is. It's an interesting concept. You also mentioned that like maybe our society is shaped in a way that our spending habits are actually like pushed to limits, to push the limits or to even go
Yeah.
above limits. Do you have like
Mhm.
examples what actually caused that for your clients or what brought them into it?
What causes
Hmm.
that usually? Well, of course, we're gonna, name the obvious, which is you've got mouths to feed and the money is not stretching till the end of the
Hmm.
month. And sometimes, especially when you have a variable income, like let's say your monthly expenses to keep a roof over your head, the lights on, and food on the table, as well as like other expenses. Let's say it's like 3 grand, for example. And you have a variable income to where you 1 month make 2,400, next month you make 6 grand, the next month you make nothing, and then the month after that you make 20 grand. Like when it fluctuates like that is when using a credit card becomes a must if we don't have an emergency fund or a cushion, right? So sometimes we go into debt because of life. Sometimes things happen, and the only way to make things happen or to pay for it is using a credit card. So obviously, we're going to be naming all of the reality of things. The other thing is that our spending habits are really impacted by us, really. If we set that part aside, the reality bit aside, what I see with my own clients is that their spending habits really, 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 really is impacted by unresolved money wounds. Okay, because unresolved money wounds can look can look like many different things for different people, but most of the time they come from any emotional trauma that happened in our past. Okay, and we need to kind of like say that trauma is not about the event that happened, it's about how your body reacted to the event that happened. Anything that was too much, too fast, too soon for your nervous system can cause traumatization. It's highly subjective. So anything that maybe impacted your sense of belonging, your sense of self-worth, your sense of personhood can later on manifest as overspending. For example, so these, like a lot of times people think money wounds are related to financially related historical events that happen, but actually it's not. Because yes, of course, financial events like bankruptcy or like living in poverty in childhood and all that stuff, they are obviously real, and that they can lend to having money wounds later on in life. But also when we start looking at the bigger picture or taking a holistic look, which is what I do, is that we start looking at things that are not money related and how they have impacted um, our sense of being in the world and our sense of safety, and how we end up simulating or like manufacturing false ways of, I don't want to call them false, but like adaptive ways to create that sense of safety later on. So I don't really use the word or the term maladaptive, but we adapt to our circumstances somehow by overspending, and even somehow by underspending. I used to be a chronic underspender, and people think, oh wow, that's a good problem to have, and I'm like, no, it's not. It's really crippling, and it's really, really, really awful. It's awful. Yes, it doesn't create debt maybe, but it has its other problems, because at some point for me it really impacted my health, it really impacted my sleep, it really impacted a lot of other things. So
Creates a lack on another
yeah.
side, not in the pocket.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yes, exactly, the other shadow side.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you mentioned that like super young people get into debt, right? Even before they understand what it is. Um,
Mhm.
what, when does the shame comes in. Like if you don't even understand what you're doing, you can't really be ashamed of it. But then there's this like
Yeah.
aha moment. When is that? And like how do they actually feel this emotion of like shame when it comes to debt and money?
So shame is an internalized belief that I am bad. Guilt is I did something bad. Shame is I am bad.
Mm-hmm.
So usually the shame hits when they receive a credit card bill and they're like, what the hell is this? What is all that? And then sometimes they take it to their parents. Sometimes they, start asking around and what did I do? So it comes with the internalized belief that they did something or they are bad.
Mm.
Or of course there's the guilt factor as well of like I did something bad. A lot of times with clients their parents bail them out the first time, but then that bailing out comes with a lot of repercussions of like you should be responsible, da 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 da. So also shame can come from parents trying to educate them and the shock of everybody involved because it depends on the bill that comes out. So yeah.
So when shame is like identity based and guilt more behavioral based, how do you manage to help them get it into the picture of behavior to actually change something about
Mhm.
it?
Well, you attended the shame workshop last 2 weeks ago. The way I like to help people with shame is understanding that there is a part of them that feels shame. Because with shame, we have this overwhelming desire or overwhelming reflex of wanting to disappear, of just not wanting to be seen. And that is so overwhelming and so visceral that it really is helpful to know that the shame is not all of you, the shame is a part of you. And when we start looking at it from that perspective, we can then start addressing the shame part. And from a informed perspective, because everything that I do is from that perspective of a trauma aware, trauma informed lens, we begin, and that is usually something that we might need outside help with. We start understanding the why behind the debt. It is very, very, very important to understand. It's not as not the word like making excuses or like falsely validating the debt or any of that. It's a deep understanding in a very compassionate way of what actually happened internally to create this external behavior. So once that is understood within, that is when we start looking at things more compassionately and we start perhaps later on um, fulfill the needs that the debt fulfilled in the past in a different way. But when I say we look at the why behind the debt, it's not like, oh, it's because your dad yelled at you in 1985. It's not usually that straightforward. Sometimes it takes a longer dive in to kind of understand the nuts and bolts, because I don't really believe that one thing, it could, right, like one thing led to this behavior, like A is B. Usually where is somebody is at today is due to a series, many series of decisions that come from a series of beliefs, that come from a series of core wounds perhaps. So it's not like one equals one, this is because of that. It usually requires more of a holistic view of a person's past to better understand, to move forward with confidence, because a lot of times what happens when we have debt shame is that we don't believe in ourselves anymore.
Hmm.
We don't believe that we could do it, and we don't believe that we're not going to go back into it.
Hmm. So,
So this lack of belief is actually quite detrimental to our progress.
hmm. So you said there is not like a very common why in everyone who has debt, but did you come
No.
across several ones that are more common, or you come across of more often?
Yeah, there's a cute one, because a lot of times when we do trauma work and we do trauma healing work, it's easy for us, or it's not easy, it's obvious. It's the obvious thing to be like, my parents were going through their own shit. And I like to bring up this very common example because that puts the parents in the like in a nice light, right? I'm going to say I'm not like a parent defending person, but I know that for an effective trauma healing journey, we can't blame and shame, right? We can't blame somebody else. It's not about blaming. It's really about ownership. But this common example is when mom and dad or parents and guardians work, save to put you, the listener, in a good school. You go to that good school, and your parents worked hard to put you in this good school. However, you feel different to everybody else. You feel like their shoes look different, their bags look different, their notebooks look different. You go to their house for birthday parties or school projects, and their houses look different. Their mom doesn't work, their pantry is full. You receive a sandwich in the middle of like the project, whereas your mom is working the whole time. So that can start internalizing this belief of like, I'm not good enough. Later on, what happens when we go out and we start making our own money? We start making up for that. And that can create a spending cycle that can land us into debt.
Um, I mean, I've come across that saying quite often, that people have to hit rock bottom to change, and like to get out of debt,
Mm-hmm.
they have to really like hit rock bottom. What is like a
Mm-hmm.
very common moment where people actually seek for help? I mean, I can just imagine, like, as you said, like I joined the workshop about shame as well, and if shame is something quite heavy to handle and has like a very low frequency when it comes to energy, how do you get the energy moving towards the direction to seek for help?
Okay, so my perspective on shame as a low vibration frequency, I don't see it this way, to be
Oh,
honest.
okay.
I believe that no, absolutely not. I believe that we are quote unquote in high vibe frequency when we are authentic to
Mm-hmm.
ourselves. Whether we are feeling joyful, whether we're feeling shame, whether we're feeling sad, the paradigm of always being in high vibe, happy, shiny, yay kind of thing, just to, you know, that creates more trauma, unfortunately, and it creates this habit of doubting your thoughts. Oh shit, oh shit, I'm sad. Oh no,
Like
So
I
when
should,
we
I should, I
label
should.
things,
Mm-hmm.
I should be happy, I should be grateful. No, let's just not look at the shame. Right. So what we ignore festers in the background. So when we label shame as a low vibe, we can we judge
We
it.
don't
So
invite
we
it to the dinner
actually add
table.
shame
Mm-hmm.
to it. Yeah, we're just
Let's be
adding shame
shameful
to the
together.
shame, right? Let's be all like, yeah, right. So when people hit rock bottom and then they seek help, what actually happens is that people pay attention when they're in pain,
Mm.
right? And most of the people that come to me, they are at a stage in their lives where they know from their potential, from their intuition, that they are meant for more. They are meant for more than just to worry about money, that they are here in this lifetime for the next 90, 100 years to create something for themselves, to be happy, to maybe create an impact on the world, to, spend good quality time being present with their family, their loved ones, and they deserve better than to remain stuck in cycles and paradigms of always just worrying about money, whether it's debt, whether it's they're not allowing themselves to enjoy their money like I used to be. Whatever it is, it's when somebody wakes up and says, I deserve more than this. I deserve to feel happy and confident, and let's take it to the next level. This is where I'm at. This is where, at the end of like the journey with me, this is where clients are at. We get to a stage to where money becomes a friend. Money no longer is the obstacle. Money just becomes like, oh, I really want this. I know that money is going to show up. I know that if money doesn't show up when I want it to, there is something else. It's having that faith of like, I want to go to, like for example, I want to go to Sweden next month. So I need 20 grand to just land in my account. That month, end of the month comes, there's no 20 grand. I'm not like, oh my God, I'm forgotten, I'm not worthy. It's not that. It's more like, oh, I wonder what else is there in store. Okay, I'm not meant to go to Sweden next month. I wonder what else is there. Okay, bring it on. So that kind of curiosity, that is not like 100%. I don't have that 100% all the time. But when you know what it looks like, even if it's modeled to you by somebody else, then you know what you're looking for. Because a lot of people come to me like, I want to be abundant. I'm like, what does that mean for you? It's such a subjective word. What does it mean for you? Does it mean $10 million in the bank? Does it mean you're living on an island in a shack? Like, what does it mean to you? Right? So, yeah.
Oh, wow. Cool. Well, in one of your early episodes, you said, like, no matter what trauma happened to us or which core wounds we have experienced, it's none of our fault, but it's our
Mhm.
responsibility to heal it, not to fix it.
Yeah.
I like to play with words, and I was wondering, well, if it's our responsibility, it is maybe also an enhancement of our ability to respond to the circumstances we're
Mhm.
living in. And just thinking about the example you just gave about like hitting rock bottom and then like realizing to actually be capable of sitting with the feeling, how do you
Yeah.
help or support someone or even yourself when you are in such situations to expand your abilities to respond to those circumstances?
So, I have to say something that's just going to be like, what? I cannot tell you how many times people have come to me with like 30, 50, $70,000 of debt that we did all the work, and later on, even when they're not fully paid, later on they turn around and tell me, you know what, Nadine, I'm actually grateful for this debt because without it I wouldn't have gone this deep to heal my core wounds.
Mm.
Sometimes what we do or the situation we find ourselves in is actually maybe a little bit painful, but it is part of our growth story. It's part of our growth journey. And I believe that more important than knowing how to balance the checkbook or learn how to use an app or a spreadsheet or understand financial jargon, the most important skill we have or we need to learn is having the emotional intelligence. Let's just put it that way. Emotional intelligence or the emotional regulation skills are way more important than any financial literacy program that you can ever do, because when we have a money wound, we basically react, or our nervous system reflexively reacts to money as if it's a threat. So when we are paying for something, or even when we receive money, this can register as a threat in our nervous system, which goes into fight or flight, collapse, or shutdown. Regardless of what your nervous system does, what is actually happening is that you're no longer in the critical thinking prefrontal cortex. You're in your reptilian brain, in that fight or flight mentality or the collapse. So it doesn't matter how many financial literacy lessons or podcasts that you have. You no longer have access to the prefrontal cortex where all this information is stored. So, when you find yourself reacting emotionally to money, first and foremost, emotions are not bad. Emotions are not something that we need to control. Every one of our core emotions has actually a reason behind it. And that is why in my programs, we go into emotions way before we talk about money. In my long program CFA, we talk about emotions for 3 months before we go into money, because we need to understand that every emotion, every each one of our core emotion is actually a physiological system that needs to be completed. There's a reason for it. So once we have that emotional intelligence and learn how to process emotions, PS, it's a skill we all need. No one ever taught us that skill.
You don't even learn it in uni as a psychologist.
I mean, yeah, right? There you go. So once we start understanding, oh, or actually relating to how our finances makes, or any financial transaction, how, when we start somatically relating to how our body reacts to it and understanding what your nervous system is doing and what emotions arise, then you will know how to regulate yourself, not make any rash financial decisions, because your first and foremost priority is to go back into that calm, balanced state, even if it takes days. Sometimes it's not like, oh my God, emotional regulation exercise. All right, I tapped it out and I'm all good. Sometimes it takes days. The more capacity and flexibility you create in your nervous system, and that is another reason why I work with the nervous system a lot, because we need to create buoyancy and flexibility in our nervous system. The more we have that capacity, the less time that we are going to stay stuck in dysregulation. So once we are no longer in dysregulation, once we are back to our self, capital S self, to our,
Mm-hmm.
prefrontal cortex, that is when we can access good financial decisions, to, lack of a better word.
Mm. Well, so it's all kind of a matter of perspective, right? I just came across that saying a while ago. You know, the only difference between a crisis and an adventure,
Mm-hmm.
the the difference is,
Perspective, like a
yeah,
weed and a
yeah.
flower.
It's kind of like the adventure is a
Yeah.
crisis we accept, and a crisis is an
Mm-hmm.
adventure that we don't take because we fear it might not go well.
Girl, I love that. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
really.
I'm glad you said that, and it's recorded. I love it.
And I really thought about the perspective thing and also how words play into it. Funnily, in my mother tongue, debt and fault are the exact same word. So it's actually like your fault to
Whoa.
be in debt. It's the same. It's
Ooh,
the same word.
shit.
And imagine that, like
Or like,
culturally,
or like, sorry, or like you're
you're
faulty to be in
faulty. Yeah,
debt. Ooh, that hurts.
you're
Yeah.
deadly faulty to be in debt.
Ooh.
That's heavy. But
It's
do
very
you
heavy.
feel like there's a cultural difference to the approach of that, since we've already figured that, like in the US and maybe Canada as well, you need the credit card score to actually build your
Yeah.
life, to build a company, to, I don't know, buy a house, to send your kids to school and whatever. And in countries like, definitely in Germany, and I don't know how it is in Jordan, but it's more kind of like very shameful, and never, you don't even talk about
Hmm.
money. And if
Don't talk
like,
about it. Yeah.
never about anything negatively related, which we've already figured you don't see it as negatively, but how do you think the cultural aspect plays into it?
Of course, like it's what you said, it's a matter of perception, right? Like here, to get a mortgage for a house, you get congratulated. Whoa, congratulations, you got approved for a mortgage. What does that mean? You got approved to be in debt for 30 years. Right? It's like,
Yay,
yay, it's a
party!
perception. But in other countries, I mean, it really depends. Like if you ask, I don't know, an employer in Jordan what they think about that debt, they'll be like, oh my God, never. But if you ask an entrepreneur, for example, who is already used to spending money before they actually have it, it's just the way it is. Sometimes when you have a business, is that you need to take on debt because, like I said, sometimes that debt is actually an investment. Like I've so many times put big investments like over 10K on my credit card, and within months I made three times that much because of that initial
Mm.
investment, right? So it is kind of a gamble. um it really important to see like different cultures, different religions, obviously different many things, and how they approach that, and what's becoming more and more culturally acceptable, because like we were saying, everything is more expensive, and just it's just the way of life, and it's becoming more and more accessible to people. So yeah, it's just having a line of credit, having debt, it's just really depends on not just the culture in general, but the mindset of the person.
Do you think the only thing that differs, like debt in general and an investment, or debt as an investment, is like the conscious part about like investing?
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yes, I do believe that this is true. It's kind of like moving moving and shaking in life from a place of
Hmm.
alignment and being conscious and intention versus moving and shaking life from a place of woundedness and fear.
So kind of like being a good
Fear.
investor
Oh,
is is just being shamelessly in debt.
not really. Not
Mm.
really. Being a good investor, as in like somebody that pays a lot of money.
No, I mean, if you invest, do you have the shame aspect to this, to the whole situation as well? Because in fact, it's debt. You don't have the money, maybe, or you invest the money, but then, as you said, like maybe you invest money that you don't have as an entrepreneur, so you spend money that you don't have yet. And does that also comes with shame? Because it sounds more, it's like it comes with excitement. It's like you need to invest to grow. Like, yeah,
It's not. Mm, I would change the word shameless to confident.
confident. Okay.
To because in the previous one of the previous episodes on this podcast, I talked about some telltale signs that we are improving our relationship with money, and sometimes it's the small nuance changes that tell you that you're on the right track, as opposed to like, okay, I have this much money now.
Mm,
It's like what leads us to there. And this one of the small things that I look at is your level of confidence. So whether you took on debt, for example, and you felt shame about it, right? It's about your perspective of like, I still have whatever x amount of money on my credit card or whatever it is, but now I it doesn't trigger me. Therefore, I am more at capacity to start thinking about how, first of all, this debt is contributing to my growth, how it's stretching me to go outside of my comfort zone to pay it off, and how I trust in myself that I'm gonna make it. Because even as example of like going and exercising, the high that we get in the end is that you had a goal, it was hard, you achieved it,
mm,
and that builds momentum and confidence.
mm.
I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for giving me all that context about guilt and shame and that and the positive side of it. I feel like we jumped into the shadow, but also found back to the light at the end of the tunnel. Um, yeah, I have so many like valuable things that I'm taking away. Thank you so much. I feel very complete. How do you want to wrap it up?
Oh, well, I want to know what your favorite takeaway was.
Actually, the perspective on the vibration, I was really,
Mhm.
yeah, that was like a wake up call for myself. It was like, yeah, this is so mainstream, and I actually don't believe that. And the authenticity thing is like, so that is so me. Like authenticity is something so important to me, and I think to like build
Mhm.
bridges and relationships, and probably also with money that I still have a situationship with, and I definitely want a very very committed relationship with it. I feel like you need empathy and you need authenticity
Mhm.
and maybe esteem or appreciation. And that also works with money, I think. So you gave me
Yeah.
awesome relationship advice, I would say.
Right? Here's the thing, like people say, "Are you in the financial services industry?" I'm like, "No, I think I'm in the relationship industry."
There's no
It's like how to
difference.
there's no difference. It's like this is a relationship with money kind of
Yeah.
like question that we're asking here. Like it's more of a wellness question and also a relationship question. So
Yeah.
thanks for bringing
And
that
I
up. That's really
Thanks.
funny.
And I think you even helped me
Mhm.
with another like core belief that I grew up with. My dad used to say, money doesn't play a role. We don't have any. So it was kind of like an ironic joke, but it really stuck
Mhm.
with me. And it's definitely something that
Mhm.
I still have to deal with in a way. And just the things that you
Yeah.
said really helped me to put it into another perspective. So thank you so much for all that.
Yay. You're welcome. I'm gonna share a quick story. I'm not gonna make this very long, but I'm gonna share a quick story about how sometimes when our parents say something when we're young and we have the limited resources because we're young and we don't have that maturity, how we can internalize it as a belief. So, my mom is left-handed and she is an artist and an architect. and I am a I'm right-handed. And I once asked her when I was very young, I said, why do you use your other hand? Why don't you use the same hand as I do? And dad does, and whatever. And she said, very talented people use their left hand.
Oh.
Okay. So that was something that
Oof.
I just believed, that talented people use their left hands. And then it was 1 year ago. So now I'm 43. So when when I was 42 last year, I was watching an interview, and the person that was interviewing was, I love her. I watch all her interviews. She is so smart. She's so talented. And I kept noticing that I kept looking at her hands. And I was like, why am I keep looking at her hands? And then it clicked. I was very confused because she was right-handed, but mom said that if you were talented, you should be left-handed. My mom did not say it this way, but that's how I internalized it, that if you are talented, then you must be left-handed. And I kept looking at the person that is interviewing going, why isn't she left-handed? Maybe she's not as talented as I think she is. And I was like, holy shit, what the hell? I just caught it and I was like, wow, the things that we internalize as children is just incredible. And this is just a very benign belief that I took with me for 40 years, or maybe less, maybe 36 years. I don't know. I don't remember when it happened. But like, imagine what other beliefs that our parents might have like just mentioned something in passing that created massive beliefs for us that shaped our lives later on, right? Like,
Definitely.
that is like this, that's so
And
big.
imagine, like, if that belief would be true, you would definitely have two left hands.
I remember, so when I used to be a pastry cook, I decorated cakes with my left hand. I don't know, it just happened. And I was like thinking, remembering now that I, like, in hindsight, I was like, I must have thought I was such a good cake decorator because I did it with my left hand.
Wonderful.
Oh, what a good time, Fina. Thank you so much for being on the Money Healing podcast and for being a listener and, being such a beautiful light on Instagram and for coming to workshops and being all that. So I just want to say thank you, and thank you to all our listeners out there. Please remember that there is a form in the show notes where you can pop in your questions if you have anything that you're curious about. The form is called Ask Nadine. And if you've got interviewing experience and you want to come on the podcast, just email me or DM me on Instagram. I'd be happy to have you. Let's just make this into a community kind of like podcast. This excites me a lot. Another quick announcement is that CFA is open for enrollment. That's my 6-month program, and it's taking on new clients or new students at the moment. So all the information is in the show notes. Love you and leave you, and I'll see you next time.